Good morning. It is 9:55, so I guess I'm technically starting just a bit early, so I suppose I'll be careful not to do anything important before 10 a.m. On the chat, I tried to do a poll where here in YouTube it says engage with your audience, and I wanted to do a poll, and the question would be, what is your preferred software? What do you actually use or try to use? You know, is it Blender, Krita, Tahoma 2D, OpenTunes, Adobe Animate, Clip Studio Pro, TV Paint, Moho? What's your software? The weird thing is, I looked at the poll options. At least for chat, obviously it's probably a little more expensive on if I put it on the channel, but it says ask a question, which is optional. I don't know how you have a poll without asking a question. But then the weird part is below ask a question, what you have is you've got two buttons, yes and no. And you can add an option. Okay, like the options would be the names of the different softwares, but it only gives you the ability to add two options. And the yes and no buttons are not, it is not possible to delete them. So the scope of a chat here on, or a poll here in the chat is pretty limited, it seems to me. Okay, so I'm gonna put in the chat, what is your preferred animation tool? And then I'll put such as, so I'm just going to put this in here so people can weigh in. We've got Blender, we've got Tahoma 2D, we've got OpenTunes, which is essentially the same as Tahoma 2D. We've got Krita or Krita, however you like to say that. We've got Clip Studio Paint, we've got Moho, we've got TV Paint, and Adobe Animate. Now I suppose there's others one might be using. Yeah, you know, commercial, Clip Studio Paint, obviously Moho. Basically all the ones at the end of the list are commercial, and the ones at the beginning of the list are open source. So I use Blender, Krita, Tahoma 2D. That's my choice. When I first started animating here on YouTube, well, when I started doing 2D animation generally, but here on YouTube I was using OpenTunes, but that was before Tahoma 2D was a thing. So anyway, I am curious. I had a bit of a negative experience yesterday with Tahoma 2D. I ain't gonna lie, I've been pretty enthused over the last couple weeks about Tahoma 2D, and this shot here, by the way, was done in Blender. So it's interesting to note, here you have Tahoma 2D content intercut with Blender, and I'm gonna say basically you can't tell the difference. Now this bit here, I believe is back to Tahoma 2D. I gotta look, I've been moving fast, okay. So what happened was, oh, I know what it was. This was done in Tahoma 2D up to the point where I put in the characters. Here's what happened. Just gonna say this so that if, I don't know, if maybe Tom's out there and he wants to comment. I kind of got shanked because if there, you know, one thing I do is I might do some paint in Krita, because Krita's really good with layers and, you know, blending modes and anything with digital paint. Krita's outstanding at. It's a little more anemic on the animation side, although it's serviceable, and I've done a lot of this show with Krita. But at the end of the day, the animation tools are a little less mature, a little more buggy, a little more poorly conceived, let's say. Anyway, so what I'll do sometimes is like paint a background like this painting you see in the background, and then I'll just cut and paste it from Krita over into Tahoma 2D. I've done that a million times. Not really a million, but a lot. And yesterday I got hosed really, and and by the way, I'm turning the music here all the way down. because what happened was I cut and pasted the background painting into Tahoma 2D, and Tahoma 2D crashed. And I tested it several other times, so it crashed assiduously, meaning it wasn't going to not crash. So it's possible that something in Tahoma 1.5-ish, something about the clipboard functionality, which I've really appreciated the clipboard functionality. You can paint a painting in Krita with all kinds of layers and blending modes and gradients and effects, and then just take the whole group of layers, and Krita will flatten them out, put them on the clipboard, and you can paste them into Tahoma 2D, so you don't have to use Tahoma for doing background painting. You can, and it's pretty capable, but basically Krita's better. Krita's 2 to 3 times better overall at just in terms of the flexibility and an intuitive workflow and all the rest. So anyway, it was one of those days where, for whatever reason, Tahoma 2D would not let me just paste a background in. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to fight this forever. What I did was I just did the opposite. I rendered the characters out of Tahoma 2D and brought them into Krita and then added the background. But I will say that across the board, a month ago, I was kind of like, man, I'm just feeling really pulled back to Blender. I've been a Blender guy since 1999, okay? I have a long history with Blender. And I was kind of getting pulled back to it. And then about a week or two ago, I'm going, yeah, but you know, there's some things about Tahoma 2D that are really quick and intuitive, especially when you're at the storyboarding stage or using the plastic tool, right? If you want something that's a little more rigged approach. Thing is, there's nothing you can do in Tahoma 2D that you cannot do in Blender. It's just that there's a little more setup involved. Okay, so that brings us up to date, basically. I did this shot yesterday. I don't think I added like a noise modifier or anything. What I did was the boat and the background are separated in 3D space. So by simply animating the camera a little bit to put in that bouncing around, that created the parallax, right? Because the background was just further in the back. Notice here we don't have parallax. The whole thing's simply being scaled. Actually, it's kind of like parallax because the characters aren't moving at all. All that's moving is the background. So all I did was add a transform mask and then just scale up the picture. That's it. You know, very simple. Okay, so that brings us up to date. Now, I want to say a few things about Blender and brushes. Some people find it a little baffling that I'm using Blender 2.93, and in fact, what you see here is not Blender 2.93. It's actually Blender 2.81. Kind of weird, right? Okay, let me just say this is just a really brief backdrop. In the history of Blender, there was never a time when you, especially in the 2000s, where you weren't dealing with Blender versions that were crashing at every turn for various reasons. So it did some things really well and it did some things not so well because it was really an evolving project with tons of new capabilities being added. So the enthusiasm of the development community reflected on the software in the sense that there was always something that wasn't stable, and that was just, you were just used to it. Okay, so things would change from version to version. My point in saying that is that when you talk about Blender 3 and 4, look, the capabilities, especially with geometry nodes and stuff, absolutely spectacular. The thing is, I don't use them, right? And the thing is also, even with Blender 3, the changes in the OpenGL versions and stuff made it so that my legacy equipment can't really run it anyway. So I've just settled on Blender 2.93 long-term support version is my stable version that's like, I'd keep using that for the next 20 years. However, today what I bumped into was this. It's really a little bit baffling, but here's what the deal was. When I use Krita, and I'll go ahead and run Krita just so I can make this point better. What would be the sort of universally utilitarian brush for the work I do? Okay, that's kind of the question on offer here. Well, if you watch me for any length of time, you've noticed that I do often come back to this brush, which has an icon of Conan the Barbarian. Well, the reason for that is this brush was specifically designed to emulate the feeling of John Buscema's brush strokes when he inked his own pencils of Conan the Barbarian, okay, back in the 80s. Now, just parenthetically, Rob Delatorre is one hell of an artist, and he is the #1 guy in the history of the world who has channeled John Buscema almost, I would say, better than Buscema. Now, the closer you really look at Rob's art, you can see where the cracks can begin to show here and there, but basically this is a ridiculously competent comic book artist, and his brushwork looks very, very much like this. So if you're not into Conan and John Buscema, then you don't know what I'm talking about. But the bottom line is, this is a really nice feeling brush. If you were inking a comic book, you want to have a nice curve where you can kind of it spreads out, and then you can do this hatching thing that Buscema tended to do a lot. And I agree with John Buscema. Nobody inked his art better than himself, and his brother Sal, as well, was probably second best. Okay, so I wanted to emulate that brush in Blender. Here was the part that really got me. It was kind of wacky. In Blender 2.93, it turns out, let me look here if I never pushed this off to the side, but okay, so let me explain it this way. I actually already have the Conan brush loaded in here, but the rationale behind it was the following. Number one, it's basically got the feel. Oops, I don't want that. Okay, it's basically got the feel if I turn the strength off. So if I turn strength off, then it's pretty close, but I didn't like that the ends, the tapering, I really wanted this to kind of go down to 0, and it didn't seem to want to. So I'm like, okay, I need to edit the curves so the curves are tighter. Well, it turns out that the only way, at least that I've been able to find, the only way you can access the curves in 2.93 is you have to go into the brush settings, and this is where it gets weird. Let me tell you something in Blender that may remain to this day, I don't know, but here's a weird thing in Blender that if you don't know it, it'll drive you batty. If you're rendering ping images out of Blender, which means you've got a character on the screen and his background is transparent. So you've got transparency baked into a ping image sequence, let's say. Do you know that in Blender, if you don't go to the output properties, I'm sorry, the render properties, go down to this obscure thing called film, and then click transparent, you can fight all day with Blender, and in your settings you can say I want to render a ping with an alpha channel, and it won't. It will not. It will only render the alpha channel as transparent if you have that really obscure film setting checked. Okay, so what I'm talking about with the brushes here is kind of like that. It's really obscure and weird, the choice they made, but here's what the choice is. The only way I can adjust the pressure curves in Blender 2.93 is actually to go into randomize. Yeah, the assumption being you want to randomize your stroke. So let's say I want to make that taper that I said. Well, if I turn randomize all the way up, as you can see, it introduces randomness in my strokes, right? Let me see what this is. Okay. And if we say use pressure, then finally the curves appear. And I can go like this and probably introduce something like that type of taper I want. Now, as you can see, didn't quite work because to make it work, I need to crank the radius up like crazy as well. But then that makes it, you can see it's a bit persnickety. To be fair, because right now I'm getting completely consistent sizing, and this doesn't seem to be doing much at all, although I'll bet you if I put it out like this, as you can see, everything's thick, thick, thick. So bottom line here, they changed something, and they changed it a lot in Blender 2.93 from what was, in my view, much, much better in Blender 2.81. In 2.81, let me get rid of this. First of all, if I go into draw mode, the curves widget is right there. It's on the toolbar. It's completely buried in Blender 2.93, and I have no idea why they did this. Maybe just to save a little bit of screen real estate. So what I did was I created the brush in 2.81 because I'm like, I just want to create my Conan brush. That's all. You know? The beauty of the Conan brush is this. If I turn up the radius, I can begin to approach that nice Buscema feel. If I turn the radius, or I should say, if I turn the strength variability off, well, that's even better, because then every stroke is completely dense like ink. It's like dipping your pen into India ink, right? And if I turn the strength back on, but the radius down, then I get what amounts to the pencil brush I always use for pencil tests. No big deal. And then the other thing I can do is turn the radius way down to, like, I don't know, somewhere in the 12 range, and turn the strength off, and now I have a very serviceable technical drawing pen. When I was in high school, I kind of got into drawing this way. I think it was from watching John Byrne's Fantastic Four. The way he inked it felt kind of like this. This isn't what he did, but it felt like this. He would, it felt a little scribbly, and then what he would have, and you kind of saw this in the classic Terry Austin, John Byrne X-Men, you know, this type of thing, where you sort of, I'm going to turn the radius up just a bit to make this play a little better. Right? Let me see. Oh, pressure's supposed to be off. Pressure and strength should both be off, because you just want it to be like a technical drawing pen. Okay, so now this is an interesting thing. You see these little hiccups here? Caveat, everything I've said so far will be, if you're going to customize your brushes, it will be affected by your graphics driver, I found out. So basically, long story short, is I got the Conan brush dialed in like perfect on my laptop, running under Linux with a Wacom tablet. Standard traditional tablet, you know, a cheapo tablet, not a tablet screen. I imported the exact brush into both Blender 2.81 here on the big machine with the tablet screen, and into Blender 2.93, and in neither one did the brushes actually perform as wonderfully as they did on the laptop. So the graphics card, well, maybe not the graphics card, but the driver for your stylus or your tablet will make a difference. Anyway, Byrne and Austin had this thing going on that was kind of like this. It would be like you've got these lines that kind of thicken and thin, and then a little bit of hatching to sort of delineate. I'm drawing what, I mean, I suppose this is like Mr. Muscle Man's arm or something. And the brush is frankly just a little bit too thick. Probably more like 8 maybe. But this is kind of the feel that Byrne and Austin achieved with the X-Men through that period of time, you know, when the whole you know, Death of Phoenix thing happened and all that. So that would have been around 1982, I think. I don't know. So the cool thing is that if I leave strength off, but crank the radius way up, but turn the curve on, then now I've got John Buscema's brush. And it was weird because I had to dial in things like whatever they do with active smoothing, they had to have completely changed mathematically the algorithm from 281 to 293. They have to have, because the active smoothing was set to like 2 or 0.2, I should say, on the laptop, and I brought it in here, and I had to bring it down to like 50. Otherwise, it was like when you press shift to invoke the stabilizer, where the line was just dragging like crazy. It was like a way different effect. Now I also have stabilizing set. So basically what I did was I turned the active smooth down to almost nothing, just enough to give the stroke a little bit of creaminess. Now, so then what I can do at any time is I can still invoke the stabilizer by hitting shift, but I've got the stabilization settings set as low as possible. So what that means is I'm inking, and then I say I want to draw a long line and I want to, you know, I need it to be stable. Then I'll hit shift, and it just gives me that little bit of smoothing. Okay, so bottom line, The Conan brush it's not completely dialed in because what it's doing here on the or on the big machine, not totally happy with it yet, but it'll probably get there. Uh, but the long story short is I had to make the brush in 2.81 so that I could then append it to my scene in Blender 2.93. If you're wondering what the heck I'm talking about, one of the things about Blender that makes it absolutely spectacular and has for 25 years is you can go File, Append, and that allows you to go into a I'm looking for my folder here under the resources. Okay, you can actually, this is a blend file, so it's just, you just saved your scene out of Blender. Well, with the append functionality, you can actually double click that, and you can see that there's literally a file structure inside the blend file, and you can browse to the assets that you're interested in, which is, you can see right here, there's my Conan brush in the set of brushes, and you can import into another Blender scene, and by the way, very significantly, a completely different Blender version. You can import assets from one file to the other. And actually, that's what I did last time I live streamed, where I pulled in the grease pencil object from another file so that I could then have all of these materials that were mapped to each of the characters in my show. Okay, so that brings us up to date, basically. There's I tell you, the thing about Blender 2.81 that I like, I think that they've kind of found the sweet spot. If they had gotten the fill tool right in Blender 2.81, I probably would be using it all the time. As it is, they didn't quite, in that the fill tool in Blender 2.81 has a really, first of all, it doesn't have the gap closer tool. Not a big deal, just something to be aware of. But in Blender 2.81, if you do the fill like this, look at what happens. Okay, so now that's not the end of the world. It just means that when you go to fill something, it's better if you can have it all inside the screen, right? But you'll notice that this does create an artifact. So in the real world, you'd go, oh, I guess I need to like just redo it. Not a big deal. Whereas in Blender 2.93, you've got the gap closing tool and stuff. It's really just one notch above in terms of the ink and paint process. However, broadly speaking, I don't like the changes, that they made to the Blender brushes in 2.93. It's like a lot of things in software, like the masking in 2.93. It's way more capable, but it also is a lot more, there's a lot more setup involved. It's persnickety, and because it was a work in progress, there's options and, you know, aspects of brush construction that you want to access, and you have like no way. Let me put it this way. I spent an hour with a fairly respected large language model talking about this morning, searching Blender 2.93 for the stupid curves just so I could change the taper on a brush. And it was like a loop, because the data that's out there that the large language models are citing is basically wrong-ish. What they're saying is, well, you can create a new brush, and then at that point, if the curves for like strength or radius are already baked into the brush, then you can tweak them. Wait a second. You still at some point and at some place in the software have to access the freaking curves. You know, how do you do that? As far as I've been able to tell, up to now, there is no way. I don't know what it is. If somebody knows, they can post it. As far as I can tell, the only way that you can access the curves, obviously, just to be clear, obviously you can invoke pressure. But it turns out it's often the case that you want to adjust the response to the pressure. Now there's a middle ground that is simply, well, go into your tablet drivers, you know, applet, where you set the settings for your driver, and you may be able to change the response curve there. Anyway, it's totally hidden in Blender 2.93. If it's anywhere, it's hidden. And if it's not hidden, the only place it is in the brush settings, and you literally don't get to adjust the curve for pressure unless you actually turn randomness all the way up, which you almost never want, which is really weird. And I'm not kidding, it truly is this way. So right now my stroke will be randomized. Okay, now oddly enough, that doesn't look very randomized, which is another weird thing about it. I'm seeing a lot of that, frankly, in Blender 2.93, where I've been getting along and doing a lot of work in 2.93. So it only became a little bit of an issue when I started editing my brushes. And then I stumbled into these things where, here's the corners of the program that are still pretty rough around the edges. And right here, right there, I don't see any randomness. But if I turn this off and just turn up the radius randomness, I still don't see it. So that's pretty weird. I don't even know what's going on, because a little while ago I was fiddling with it, maybe with a different brush, and it randomized it a lot. So yeah, there's definitely some winky dinkiness going on with the Blender 2.93 brushes. It's kind of understandable, because in 2.93 they introduced all this. All these crazy brushes for doing like foliage and stuff. It's super cool. The problem is, I'm like, how do you create these brushes in the first place? And it's been frighteningly difficult to just find information about that. It's really strange. In this case, let me see. I'll bet you this needs to be invoked. Yes. You need to be either in material, material preview? Yeah. You've got to be in material preview or fully rendered mode if you want to see the effect of these, badass new brushes. So, just something to be aware of. Maybe that has something to do with the randomness thing I was fiddling with. I don't know. Let's go to Conan. And now Conan, because of the material, that material is completely wrong. Let's go to the correct material and see what we get. Turn the strength variability off. I mean, that's pretty good, but like I said, to me, this is basically, it's not like it's unacceptable, because if I'm careful I can work with it, but this is not quite what we're looking for. All these wacky bits at the beginning could be because of the driver too, let's be clear, but that's not really the problem. The problem is that, to me, this little bit here, if we blow it up, what we really see is this, when what I want to see is this. I want it to be a nice crisp taper. And as you can see, I just can't get this down to nothing. If I'm really light on the touch, I kind of can. So these are just things you'll learn. And there we go. Okay, so let me check the chat, see if anything's going. Holy cow, man, things are crazy in the chat. I'm sorry, guys. I've been sleeping. How you doing? For animation, it's always been OpenTunes. Recently moved to Tahoma. I'm currently learning CSP and Blender. Yeah, Chizyapo. As I alluded to at the beginning of the live stream today, I'm kind of, look, my toolkit is Tahoma, Blender, and Krita. But increasingly, after a couple of weeks of really hitting, well, maybe a month or so actually, of hitting Blender really hard, then coming back to Tahoma, and now I'm kind of gravitating back to Blender. Honestly, what my gut is telling me is simplicity, 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 and use Blender for like everything you possibly can. And basically, when I was doing the pencil tests and then the ink and paint in Blender, and then doing what I did on this last shot, where I brought the characters, in this case they were brought in from Tahoma 2D, not Blender, but I'll bring the characters in, I'll render them and bring them into Krita just to add both the background and sometimes like gradient effects, like lighting effects and stuff. I'll do in Krita just because it's quick and easy to do so. I've illustrated here on the live stream many times how to do it. Like, to create this rim light effect is like dead easy in Krita. It takes basically 3 to 5 steps. You have to duplicate the layer that your characters are in, reduce all of those layers luminance to 0 so it's black, and then use a transform mask to offset it a little bit, but have it alpha mask so that when I take the black version of TNR, for example, here, and move it down this way, it doesn't show out here because it's masked to the underlying character layer. and then you just dial in the transparency of it, and it works great. So, anywho, the short answer to your question is I'm really basically saying Blender's my tool. Blender's been my main tool for 25 years, and I drifted away, and then I drift back, and it's one of those on again, off again relationships. So for me, it's definitely Tahoma. Hey Bert, I would encourage you to expand on that comment if you're still around, because we'd probably like to know why. Like, what is it about Tahoma, and what have you actually compared it with that leads you to say, yeah, Tahoma is basically my go-to tool? I would actually agree with you. If it wasn't for Blender, Tahoma is where I land in concert with Krita, obviously. In practice, if Blender's around, there's not much I need Tahoma for. So it tends to be Krita Blender or Krita Tahoma for me. And the only reason Krita is just because on the paint side, it's just so strong. I mean, you're not going to beat Krita as far as paint programs go unless you're going to start extolling the virtues of built-in AI tools and all that sort of thing. Hello, Dave. Good to see you again, Amar. Blender and Clip Studio Paint EX would be for the final animation, with Pencil 2D or Flip a Clip for rough animation. Okay, yeah, Pencil 2D probably should have been on the list. As far as I know, I remember I was hacking the code for Blender or for Pencil 2D. There were things about the code that I thought were pretty good, pretty well organized, yada yada yada. Back then, I was using Qt Creator. But here's the bottom line on Pencil 2D. Pencil 2D was a pretty darn serviceable little tiny animation program something like 7 years ago. Then what happened was it became abandonware, where the guy that created it originally left the story. And when it kind of became more of a community thing, they changed some things because I think they were trying to dial in the fill tool or something. At the time I was involved, it was the fill tool that was the object of chagrin and attention. My opinion was the slightly rougher version of the program that was originally created by the original creator was a more usable program. Like the earlier version, like 0.7 or something, I don't remember what the numbers were, but that was like, yeah, I mean, you could, especially for rough animation, you could get some work done. Once they, quote unquote, made it better, in every single way that I could find, it was definitely worse. And as far as I know, in the last 5-6 years, it has not improved at all. Like, nothing's been done, as far as I know. So if I'm wrong about that, if something's changed recently, say the word. All you need is texture stamp and tweak the settings. All you need is the texture stamp, like you would in Photoshop or Clip Studio's Light, using creating brushes in Krita. Well, I find creating brushes in Krita is kind of stupidly easy, actually. Yeah, film transparent, totally required, because if you're using Blender and you're rendering transparent pings, you are going to claw out your own eyeballs because you don't understand why you did select that you want it to be a ping, not RGB, but rather RGBA, meaning the alpha channels included. You're rendering this, but yet it doesn't render it transparent, it renders it white. And you're going, why? And you don't know why. And it's a dirty little secret that's hidden way down here under film, of all things. Why they did that? Just no clue. I have no clue. I didn't even know what thinking would have had to go through your mind to make you think that was, yeah, here, we'll put it here. I don't get it. But, I wasn't there, and it's been 15 years ago since it happened, so. So I discovered that a while ago because I tend to navigate and click on stuff. All right, let's see what's going on. I'm going to try to chew through the rest of these comments. I'm just trying to sort of stay engaged here a little bit. In 4.2 and higher, it's where it should be under the brush settings. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to do that. I'm not going to be going to 3 or 4. No reason to. There's just nothing in my workflow that suggests that's a good idea at this point. The link is cool as well. Right. Okay, so if anybody wonders, they can ask in the comments. Amar's referring to the difference between linking and appending in Blender. It's the same in Krita, basically. Let me explain it that way. In Krita, you can drop an image into Krita And instead of actually having it become part of the layers here and baked into the Krita file, it actually is. I need to get the terminology here. Bear with me for 10 seconds while I load my image viewer just so I can grab some random image, drop it in here, and what you want to do is use a file layer. If you do a file layer, the thing that's crazy about it is two things. Number one, if I go into, even if I open this image in Krita, watch this. You'll find this interesting. I believe that this is actually real time. So I'm going to open a new document with the same image. Now watch this. This is quite useful, although I don't find uses for it that often. I'm going to go like this. Okay? I'm pretty sure that in real time, a moment from now, this is going to show up here. If it doesn't, I probably have to save it. Let me save it. I think that's it. So I'll save it, and look at that. In real time, it updates. Now what I want to do here, of course, is undo that and resave it, because I didn't want that in the picture. But, and I know I just added a random dot there that I didn't mean to. Okay, so there's another thing, though. If you're like into the Krita thing, let me tell you the one thing that's really significant here. If I bring an image into Krita, okay, and it's a background image or something, and God forbid I'm panning against my background and my characters are moving against an animated background or something. I say God forbid because it does not take very long at all in Krita to bog the program down horribly to where everything, every time you switch frames or want to play back or anything, you have to sit and wait for Krita to fill the animation buffer. Everything's about waiting when it comes to animation in Krita. Well, interestingly, this ostensibly very large background painting, which it isn't, but if it was, this would bog down Krita, especially if you animate it. Okay? Which you can. But here's the thing. What I found, I tripped over this by accident, is that if you insert it as a file layer instead of bringing it into the document itself, yes, you do need to be careful, because if you change this image, for some other reason and save it, when you reload this Krita file, the image will be different. So you got to keep that in mind. However, here's the thing that's cool, is that if you need to animate this thing, to add a transform mask for the purpose of animating a file layer in Krita is 10 times as performant as if the image was actually in the Krita file. I have no idea why this is true. Not a clue. Your characters, this actually happened in the show. Tianara's walking up the trail towards the cave, and you want to animate the background so that you can just draw her in one place and not actually have to move her around, right? It's a common anime technique. So the transform mask with a file layer is uber performant in Krita. Weird, weird, weird. There it is. And, of course, you can set keyframes and all the rest. Why did I explain all that? Well, because in Blender, if I want to bring in some assets from another Blender file like I did yesterday, where I brought in the entire palette of colors by importing a different Blender file, or I should say importing the grease pencil object from another Blender file. Okay? I did this so that every time I create a new scene, I instantly and magically have all of the materials for all of my characters ready to go. Okay. So what Amar was saying is, well, Dave, yes, you can append the grease pencil object or the brush or the image or whatever you want from another Blender file, right? We can show that. Hello. Got to go to my folder. It's just a bit of a drag because Blender doesn't seem to remember where I was last. That's okay. I'll just go to Blender here and just open something. So you can see that inside the Blender file, there's all kinds of stuff. You could use the camera from another Blender scene. And in this way, you can sort of append things to your current Blender file that will then help you dial in your startup file, which means that you've got everything set up the way you want it. So every time you create a new scene, all the boilerplate housekeeping is already done. That's basically the reason you do it. So what Amar's pointing out is he's saying, well, wait a minute. You don't have to append the camera. You can actually link the camera. He's correct. If you link the camera, this is more, in my opinion, it's an application for a group project's climate, more so. Why? Because what it does is it limits what you can do with it. When you link it, all of the animation that might be baked into that object is going to play. And you can't edit the properties of that object very much. The object itself, you can move around. You can animate it. You can scale it, translate it, and rotate it. But beyond that, you can't do anything with it. It's frozen to the Blender file that it came from. So in that way, you can restrict what people playing in the Blender sandbox can do with your particular blend file. I hope this is making sense. And if it's not, don't sweat it too much. But linking is like doing the file layer in Krita. Appending is like just dragging and dropping the image into Krita, and you're not using a file layer, you're just dropping it in. And so what happens is effectively a copy of it gets made in this Krita file. Same thing with appending in Blender. Once you append something into your current Blender file, it's just there and it's unique to that Blender file. And if you change it, those changes don't reflect back onto the blend file that you got it from. Why is this interesting? Well, it's interesting because the whole reason Ton Rosendahl designed Blender that way, and he did it for the most pragmatic of reasons, which is that he was in an animation studio where they used the tool every single day. And the idea was that you can create a blend file that you've created specifically to be a library of stuff. You might not do any animation. You might set up all your characters, your rigs, all that. And so you've got this library of content or brushes or grease pencil objects or whatever it is in this blend file, and you just pull into another blend file through the append functionality just the pieces you need to go ahead and move forward with the scene you're working on. It's a really cool and elegant and, by the way, robust way of working. Blender has worked this way for 25 years. It's extremely reliable and blah, blah, blah. So you make the file once and update it in that file, and the linked object will update in each project. Yes. So Amar explained that quite well. We had this discussion before in reference to this issue. Go to the active tool. Okay, wait a second. We did have this discussion before, and that's what was bugging me about it, because I'm like, I vaguely remember we already talked about this. Okay, I'm going to follow your instructions because I got to tell you that Mistral didn't quite do the job. It kept giving me bad information, and by pluck and by luck, I sort of figured it out. But right now, here we are. We're in Blender 293, and the question would be this. I've got my Conan brush. How do I change the response curves for the radius and the strength? That's the question that Amar is opening. You said go to the Active Tool Settings panel. Active Tool Settings panel, which is this, right? This is the Properties panel? Well, no, this would be this is the Properties panel. This is the tool options. So I know I'm having to learn the same thing again here twice, Amar, so sorry about that. But you're saying go here to the tool bit, and you'll see the curves. And that's what I'm saying is what am I missing here? Do I need to not be in draw mode or something? As far as what I saw, and thank you for reminding me that we already talked about this, as far as I've been able to figure out with quite a lot of effort, frankly, is that the only way I can access the curves is if I first randomize it. You'll see the curves. They call it layer object in other programs. You can also do this with animations as well. Well, I think they added it there because the film is opaque. Oh, you're talking about that now again. For me, Blender's too intimidating. It's pretty intimidating. Krita's good for painting, but it's not that good for animation. Agreed. Tahoma's very... Yes. Yeah, I agree with you, actually, Bert, completely. If you're going to basically limit yourself to just one tool, and you really do want to do animation, Tahoma or OpenToons is probably the best choice for most people. If you're going to be in the open source world. You know, if you're going for commercial software, then it's anybody's bet because, you know, I don't trust commercial software to be any better or any less buggy than open source software. It is all buggy. It all has its issues from version to version. But because it's a commercial tool, does that mean it's going to be better in some way? It could be, but it has more to do with the approach to the development that the software happens to be approached with. For example, Media Studio Pro by ULead was a very capable, very stable product. And one of the reasons was they actually the application itself was basically a shell, and every single tool was a DLL. So that meant that to update the program, all they had to do was just replace the DLL, and they had a clean interface for that. 3D Studio Max is the same way. It started out, the idea was that the program 3ds Max is actually just a shell, and everything's a plugin. And they did a good job of coming up with a robust component model that allowed developers to create plugins really easily, because they understood out of the gate that the plugin community and the commerce associated with the development and sale of plugins, they correctly guessed that that would be a really big, important part of 3ds Max's development. And in fact, they capitalized on it themselves by releasing 3ds Max and then immediately releasing Character Studio as an add-on for another like $1,500 at that time. Okay, it's the first option on the right side where you have all of the panels that is done. It's the item. Wait. Okay, I know we've done this before, and again, Amar, I apologize, but I'm gonna go through this with you. When I use the iPad, I use TuneSquid and Procreate. Yeah, Procreate a lot of people like. I haven't ever used it, but I've heard it's pretty awesome. How to access the curves. It's the first option on the right side where you have all of the panels that is docked. Oh boy. It is the first option on the right side where you have all the panels that is dock. God, this always happens where there's one little thing about the answer that is unclear. So you're going, okay, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. Are you talking about this set of panels? Are you talking about this set of panels? I don't know what you're talking. You're talking about this. Oh dear. Yes. How did I miss that? Golly. Damn. How did I miss that? How did I forget that? I swear to God. Friends, I hate to tell you. Just when it comes to memory or learning, get your stuff pretty much figured out before you turn 50. Because I'm telling you, after 50, you're still learning. You can still keep your mind sharp and all that, obviously. But I do find I kind of have to keep relearning things over and over, in order to get them set and, neurologically baked in. It's maddening. But okay, Amar, you are the hero today. You are absolutely the hero, because this is what I was freaking looking for. And I'm going to tell you, none of the large language models know this. Not one damn large language model knows this. GPT, they don't know. They don't know. They just start rattling off instructions that are just patently wrong. It's crazy. Okay. So thank you, Amar. You are the man. I feel like this probably wants to be more like here. Somewhere close to this intersection point. Maybe something like that. Let's just see. To test it, for Conan, I would want to go to Charcoal Ink, and I would want to turn off the strength variability because I want it to be solid black like a brush, like I'm using a brush, and I would think that the radius probably wants to be like 200. Okay? Not bad. I think the radius could be even higher, maybe 250-ish. Okay. That mostly, it's not perfect though. Let's look here close. Okay, that's not perfect. Can we fix it though? Well, I'm going to guess from low pressure, I'm going to guess that we want low pressure to taper more than high pressure. So I'm going to actually move it here. Yes. Oh man, that's what I'm talking about. Dude. But again, this radius probably for a true brush, Probably needs to be about 300. And then that seems to, again, kind of impact the curve. But that's pretty good. That is pretty freaking good. Okay. So then in the advanced, I don't know. Let me crank the input samples to 10 just to see what happens. Okay, that doesn't really matter. That's basically a subsampling thing-ish. I'm going to turn the active smooth now up to, let's call it 0.25 just to be fair. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. I still don't like the fact that it doesn't always catch this, but that's probably a driver issue. Okay, that's pretty. All right, I'm going to go tab, all, get rid of all these strokes, tab. Okay, that I like. And to be the Conan brush, that's pretty much the settings you would want. All right. So the thing is, when I approach a new scene in Blender, I almost never want that. What I do want is I want the strength to be variable, and I want to be using my pencil test brush, so probably the radius needs to be smaller too. Okay, and another thing, this is important. This, once again, feels wrong to me. Advanced. This feels too aggressive. I'm going to go back to 0.1 and see how it feels. Yeah, I mean, that's about right. There you go. Now you've got a brush for doing pencil tests. So the whole mindset behind this whole thing was, number one, I want to have the Conan brush that I have in Krita. I want to have a brush that feels like I just took a number 9 red sable brush, dipped it in an ink bottle, and I'm painting with ink. Okay, that was the goal. The secondary goal is, can I create that brush and then by just tweaking a couple settings at any point in time, have what I need for doing, you know, pencil tests or whatever. When I go fast here, you can see the granularity of the sampling. This is where probably turning the input samples up higher might help. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it will, though. So let's just turn it up to 5 and see what happens. Yeah. That basically smooths things out. Okay. I believe that's a better choice. So for pencil tests, I think we have our brush. That's pretty good. I can still turn on the stabilizer, but I've got the stabilizer set to its weakest possible setting. So the only reason for the stabilizer is at any time I can hit shift and just have a little more control. Okay? So in this scenario, I'm actually going to, right now, go back to my layers and file. I'm going to save my defaults right now. Boom. Okay. Now, if I want to do the Conan thing, I can turn my strength variability off. And basically, that's pretty good. All right. Undo, undo, undo. If I want to do the technical drawing pen thing, I also turn this variability off. And I'm thinking maybe put this at like 24 or something. So that you just have, this is a technical drawing pen. It single width, good for inking. If you want good, clean Alex Toth type lines, you know, if that's, or Gil Kane, right? Gil Kane always did these really, it's like, this is what I always do, is I always draw these muscle arms. I think because when I was a kid, I just did it a lot, right? But that's the John Byrne, Terry Austin thing I was talking about. It's like, it'd be like if you ink this way, you basically scribble. You ink your comic book by scribbling, and then when you come around a turn here, you just go like that. A lot of hatching going on. But that doesn't work for me in terms of if I'm going for the Buscema thing, then I want to have a much larger radius, keep the strength variability turned off so that I can just basically flick with my brush. And I would say that going to the larger number of input samples definitely helped. Okay, so grab that. Oh, well, actually, let's just go here. I don't think I changed any parameters. I just reviewed them. Okay, so thank you, Amar, again, for helping me remember that. That's just like, it's so stupidly obvious. And why it's not documented really anywhere, I just don't have a clue. It's a big secret. Okay, so that's where we're at today. So, all right. Can we get busy? Busy, busy, busy on our show. Well, we can, but we have to open Tahoma 2D. What? Wait, why do you have to open Tahoma 2D? Well, I'll tell you why. Because I did the for the final sequence of the show, I did the whole storyboard in Tahoma. So I'm just having to refer back to it for the purpose of the subsequent shots. Now this is, I believe, the wrong one. Well, I mean, the storyboard is there. Okay. Yes. Let me hit the play button. Yes. So this is what that's what this is. This right here. I exported the imagery from Tahoma, and then in Krita, I added the shadows, the rim light. So the shadows, the rim light, that was all added in Krita, and then I just animated the background image. Okay? So that's that shot. So what's next? One wonders. Okay, yes. Okay, well, the Luca shot, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to set the start marker here. Boom. End here. Set the stop marker there. In this case, I probably can go ahead and proceed with Tahoma 2D. There's one thing. Okay, there's one thing I'm noticing. Okay, guys, here's the issue. In the show, we've got Luca in the background. And now we're cutting to a close-up where he's fundamentally in a different pose. So obviously there's more than one solution here. Well, why don't you just add another pose where he's looking like this? You know, except the only difference would be his eyes wouldn't just be dots. Yeah, you could do that. Or what you could do is, why did my mouse just disappear when I'm over the Vegas interface? My mouse disappeared. Okay, there's the preview. Okay, I see what happened. Okay, what I could do is return back to Mel and give him a shrug of the shoulders. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that right now. It'll be quick. It'll be easy. Open recent. I think it was W. Yeah, okay. So now this is all black because that's the boat. So you have to be in material preview mode or rendered mode to see the background. Okay, so I want to just take this frame and add a shrug. Let me see. In the show, he says his line of dialogue, and it does cut right off. So I'm actually on the other screen. I'm checking to see what did this render through. 59. Okay, let me go back here. So we can cheat here a little bit. And the way we're going to cheat is we're simply going to extend the end of the shot to frame 80 and re-render it. What will happen is in Vegas, it's still only going to reference up to frame 59. But we're going to add one thing here, and then we'll just take the last 15 frames or whatever and put that in Vegas in between the shot with Luca and Tianara in order to break the audience's recollection of this, so that when we go to the close-up of Luca, it plays well. And that's, you know, it's just good. I mean, the more you... Usually fairly rapid-fire editing these days is kind of a good thing anyway. So how are we going to accomplish that? Let me show you. First thing I'm going to do is go over the timeline and hit the tilde key so that all of the layers are invoked, and anything I do is going to affect all layers. Okay. Now let me hit the play button. See, the cool thing is the variability of the boat and everything is still going to be in there. Probably for our purposes, it would be good to... let's actually go to the graph editor and take a look at the camera real quick. Yeah, what I really want to do, boy, see, this is one of those things that I really liked it. Back when Blender was before version 2.5, actually. I actually liked the IPO editor way better than the graph editor. It's the same old story I've said before. The graph editor is way more powerful, but the IPO, it was just, you could tell that Ton Rosendahl programmed that thing knowing he was going to be using the darn thing every day because it just hit the sweet spot in terms of giving you what you needed right at your fingertips. Key thing being, and I guess we could probably do it here. Let's try. So what would the concept be here? The concept would be in the object transform, this is going to look a little weird. What we want to do is we want to extend on the y-axis. So this would be the y location. Okay, so that's this. All right, let's take a look at that. So okay, hang on a second. This is y location. See, we need to really expand this curve so we can see what's going on here. Is this actually doing anything? Pardon my confusion, but I'm making a distinction in my mind between the position on the y-axis of Blender versus a translation in the camera's own y-axis. So I think I'm looking at the wrong thing. Y location, there's one way to find out, and that's to take this and really swap it. Okay, so that moved it closer. So what I'm going to say is I'm just going to go here. See what it did? It just made it so that the movement on the y-axis continues through to the end. Now it's not quite strong enough, frankly. Really not strong enough. That's getting too strong. So something like that. Okay, and then what about the randomness? Well, that would be the camera's local x-axis mainly, but z as well. Let's look at z. Let me zoom out and find the z location. I guess I'm really needing to scale this out. There we go. Okay, so let's find the z. So what we want to do is z would be up and down for us. For most people, that's what the y-axis, but for us, it's z this way, and it's x this way. Okay? So as you can see, yep, this curve, which does curve quite a bit, is the z-axis. So let's go ahead and add some fun on the z-axis. All we're trying to do is create a situation, so I'm just going to hit Control, click. Hello? Maybe it doesn't work the way it used to. Maybe it's double-click now. How do I add a new node? Right mouse click, insert a keyframe. Yes, okay, well that'll work. All right, so all I'm doing is, I guess what I could do is go here and hit the I key probably. Only the selected channel. Okay, stop everything. I'm going to hit undo because I have no idea where it inserted a keyframe, which is kind of annoying, but there it is. So I need to grab the Z location, hit the I key only in the selected channel, and there it is. Okay, so now that just added bounce. See? So Mel's still bouncing around a bit. And the only other thing we probably want to do is the X location, because you can see that the X, well, the X already had variability kind of baked into it. Now, one thing you could do is, just for Blender people, if you don't know this, it's a good thing to know, is that I believe it's in the channel menu, you can extrapolate constant extrapolation. I'm thinking what we want to do here is make it cyclic. So if we make it cyclic, so you go to your channels and you make it cyclic. Boom. What it does is it repeats everything forever. And then if you go out of edit mode, well, I mean, I guess what you do is you select all the nodes. And let's say you scale it on the x-axis. I'm sorry. Let's just hit the S key. Why? Okay, why is it not letting me scale this curve? Ah, I hate it when stuff that I did for 20 years in Blender always worked the same way, and then I go into Blender 2.8 forward, something, some version later than, I guess, 2.7.9, and all of a sudden things don't work the same way. Makes me a little crazy. But the point is, I in every other earlier version of Blender, I could go, show, done. That's it, done, and just show you, and for some reason I can't now. Okay, if I grab them with the freaking lasso and hit the S key, that seems to be doing the trick. Okay, so you can actually hit the G key. The way this is working, I mean, I guess that's kind of interesting. If you get to the outer limits of the playback range, it basically locks it. That's kind of interesting. I've never seen that before. But anyway, the point of the story was that randomness, you can make it last forever, right? So that it just keeps going. Definitely handy. Okay, back to work. We want to be on the dope sheet. Okay, so for our purposes so far, there's no reason why we cannot save this. So let's go to our grease pencil object. And by the way, we do have an effect on this, the rim light effect. So when it's rendered, you can see that. Okay, so now we've changed it so that the movement of the boat does continue, and we got some pretty wacky jerks in there that aren't the best, so hang on. Kind of a drag, but we're going to have to, yeah, that jump to the right, that would be the x-axis. Let me see. That's probably the Z right there. Okay, so I hate to have to do this, but I'm going to have to do this. Let's go back to the graph editor. Let's go back to the camera. And, I see what's going on. It would probably be useful to turn this Bezier handle a bit and just smooth that out. Now this is still a little abrupt, so let's round off that top. I don't know. Let's just see if it made it any better. Let's go here. Right there. There it is. That's the problem. Let's go X, delete that keyframe. That should smooth it out. Yep, there we go. Now I'm looking for anything in the right there in the Z axis. Yep, right there. Let's just let's get rid of this one. No, Blender. I just want to grab what I want to grab. I don't want to grab that one. Okay, that's what I wanted. So we smooth this out. And this one, why does that? Oh, this is I see. This is contracted from over here. Okay, so that means this is the problem. Yes. Okay. So it's okay to have a little bit of an abrupt bounce here and there, right? But you kind of want it to be smoothish. This is what I was talking about. Was it yesterday when I live streamed or 2 days ago? But I was talking about the fact that it would be nice to, right there, darn it. Right there, that is unacceptable. So we're going to solve this if it kills us. So I'm going to go Z location. That didn't do it. It's blue. Oh, actually, this might be what I'm looking for. That's it right there. I'll betcha. Okay, let's just kind of smooth that out, and then we'll hit the G key and kind of put it there. So it's still a little abrupt, I must say. If I soften that a bit, yeah, that did the trick. Yeah, I mean, he looks like he's floating in a boat. That's cool. So your mileage may vary. Again, this is an example of a node that should be rounded, and you would think that the reason it's got this little tooth right there is actually being informed by this, but it's not. That's what's weird about it. Why? Why do we have that tooth? I'll tell you what, I'm just going to stretch it out so we don't see it, frankly. If the image jumps when it loops, that doesn't matter. Obviously his positioning is supposed to change, but damn it, we still have one hiccup. So this could take, it's really, really, really sad, but this could take an hour. Like we're going to sit and dick around for an hour. It looks to me like that's on the x-axis. It's right about there. There's something very egregious. Yep, there it is. Jeez, man, come on, Blender. How come every single thing I do, you're determined to find a way to have it not look good? This Bezier interpolation scenario looks very strange to me. Very, very, very strange. It's like all your Beziers are single-handled when in fact they're actually double-handled, meaning you move one node here and it moves both of them. So this would appear to be a single. What if we hit Alt? Nope. There's some secret here, and if you guys find this boring, then I guess you don't want to learn about Blender. I'm hitting Control. That doesn't do any good. Shift doesn't do any good. Why is that node there so sharp? Why is that node so sharp? Okay, I'm going to try deleting the node then. Just get rid of it. And as God is my witness, Blender is determined that no matter what, the one thing you're not going to get here, no matter what, sorry, Dave, you're not going to get a smooth curve, no matter what you do. I've never, ever fiddled with the graph editor in Blender and had this happen. So, but that's just life. That's just life live streaming. Is there ever a session I do live streaming where I don't bump into something that I've never, ever, ever seen before? And it's like every day is the exception to the rule. I can't get this. I can't get rid of it. I don't know what to do. It's so stupid. The whole point of Bezier curves is to be able to introduce, you know, that crazy little thing called curvature. Okay, let's take a couple guesses here. What if we delete a couple of these nodes and just simplify everything, right? Get rid of that. Okay. So now, can you imagine any scenario? In fact, let's do it this way as well. Just to keep it fair, let us go into the interpolation mode, or extrapolation mode, I should say, and turn off cyclic. Let's clear the cyclic. Okay, now the cyclic modifier, I wonder if that means that's implemented under the hood with a modifier. Probably does. Okay, so bear with me. So now on the X, okay, so this is where pragmatism takes over. As far as I can see, that looks good, so let's not fiddle with it anymore. All right, so let's go back to the dope sheet, grease pencil, and make sure we grab our grease pencil object. So what was all this for, Dave? Here's what it was for. I want to go to the end of this shot and have Mel simply shrug. Okay, so how would you do this? Let me remind you of something here. You could duplicate these, because what you want is you want a start point and a midpoint and an end point to the action. We're going to have him shrug his shoulders. Okay? You with me so far? All right. One of the things we don't want to do is have him shrug his shoulders and in the process of distorting his shoulders, have his head change shape, which with the proportional editing tool is a very real possibility. So I'm going to show how you avoid that problem. Okay? Here we go. Number one, you could copy these keyframes over to here, just whatever's the last keyframe on each layer that has a keyframe. Or you could just go insert, but insert a keyframe on all channels. With the caveat that that doesn't work. Okay? And the reason it doesn't work I think, is because we inserted, oh, sorry, my bad. That was stupid. I need to insert, I need to insert a duplicate keyframe, not a new keyframe. So would that be probably in additive? If you just go into additive drawing mode, I'll bet you that does it. Yep, there you go. Okay, did you get that? So you've got this character that you're trying to expand the animation, and obviously what we want to do is have a starting point that preserves whatever was the last keyframe in every layer that we're seeing on the screen. You with me? Okay. The way you do it is you just hit the I key and insert a keyframe into all channels. The problem is it's going to insert blank keyframes, which just erases everything. Hence, this needs to be on. This is additive drawing. And that effectively means that creating a new keyframe creates a new keyframe that is a copy of the most recent keyframe. Okay, so what else are we going to do? Well, we might as well plan it out here. Let's grab all these and just go, okay, let's look at how long would it take to shrug your shoulders. Up, down, boom, right there. So now I'm going to hit Shift D and I'm going to copy this here. Now basically somewhere in here, it's probably going to be a little slower up than down. So let's say on 64, what we want to do now is select Melchizedek and not select his head and not select the boat. Okay, let's check out our layers here real quick. Is the boat, hang on a second here, that's the river. Where did I put the boat? I think, okay. I'm going to have to look at what layer I put it in. Oh, I put it in the fills layer. Okay, the boat is in the fills layer. So here's what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do before we do the shoulders is we're going to go to the vertex colors layer and lock it. Because that means if I sculpt Melchizedek, all of the colors in the boat will not be able to be manipulated. Okay, so that's step one. Okay, the problem is it's not going to save me from touching the lines. So these lines here are going to be potentially at issue, so I'm going to have to be careful. All right, and here's how we're going to do it. We're going to go into edit mode. We're not going to use sculpting, although we could. What we could do, actually, okay, there's two ways to do it. We can do this with the proportional editing tool, or we can do it with sculpting. Let's try it both ways. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a keyframe here, doing it one way, and then I'll put another keyframe doing it another way. So here we go. This is all just for fun. I'm going to go Shift Duplicate here. This one will be done with the proportional editing tool in edit mode. This one will be done with sculpting. Here's how it works. Tab key to go into edit mode. What I want to do is select Melchizedek's head. I have deliberately made sure to leave all of the layers awake and active. Now what I want to do is take my selection and invert it. That's what I really wanted to do. Okay. Now we could get even more careful with it if we wanted to by trying to isolate back out some of these strokes that are in the boat. You know, for now I think I won't bother. I'm going to hope for the best. So now what I'm going to do is, well, actually the way I did this is not really necessary, and it's probably the reason why sculpting is a better way to do it. If I'm going to use a proportional editing tool, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these regions right around his shoulders, like that. This is turned on. Significantly, I'm going to leave it with connected only. So that means that when I move this around, and I'm expanding now the scope of the proportional editing tool, I would say this is probably a bad idea. We need to be careful. We can move it a little bit. Yep, that looks pretty good, but now we need to reduce the strength until we're not really affecting his head. Okay. And now the settings should be about right. And I don't really love it. Okay. So I think you'll see in a minute why the sculpting approach in this particular case is probably better. But I'm going to hit Shift and grab a little more of this. In fact, this is the problem with the boat being baked in with the character, is making it so that this may be one of the harder, or, you know, what was it, Control? Yeah, Control lets me deselect. This is not the easiest thing in the world to do. Go, Shift. Not bad. Not bad. Okay. So now I'm not going to do interpolation. What I am going to do is hit the Go G key and lower this a little bit. Wait a minute. Okay, yeah, that's fine. And go here, G key, and raise it a little bit. So it sort of springs up. And maybe we'll go one little tween here. So here we have a shrug. Okay, let's go into draw mode so we don't see the... That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's not bad at all. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Okay, what's another approach? The other approach would be you go in here, and you do go into edit mode, although you can do it from sculpting mode as well. And the idea would be, in edit mode, we're going to say we want to be able to influence everything kind of around here. That's really what we want to be able to influence. And then what we do is we hit the D key and go back into sculpting mode, but we click this little button that limits the sculpting to whatever was previously selected. Right? Okay. And then I'm going to zoom in and just basically kind of do this the hard way. I'm hitting the F key to adjust this. And then we'll just see who wins. You know, we'll see which version of it looked better. Okay. So, and that's not bad. And I'll even let his chest raise up a bit. Okay. And in this case, what we can do, I don't want to do interpolation actually, because I definitely don't want to do interpolation. The reason is I'd have to interpolate every layer one at a time. It's just a big pain in the butt. Okay, so I'm just going to put that in there. And then probably I can cheat by selecting this little tween that I just did and duplicate it to here so that it provides a midpoint between the shrug and the end. Okay, so now we've got two shrugs, and just for kicks and giggles, I'm going to change this to 50 to 80. Let's see how this looks. Let's go into draw mode again so we see it the way it really looks. That's pretty good. That's good. Okay, I am going to extend this to 90. And then you guys tell me which version looks better. I have an opinion about it. So there's Edit Tool, Sculpting. What do you think? Which one looks better? Honestly, it doesn't matter. But for me, the one done with the proportional editing tool, the first one, looks better. Yeah, it just looks more real or whatever. So, yep. So I'm going to take these and delete all these keyframes. Gone forever. Put this back to 80. And re-render the whole darn thing. And so now what happens is that well, I guess I'm not re-rendering the whole thing. I'm actually just re-rendering the part that's new. Okay, so that lets me pop in the, go over to Vegas and pop in the shrug, right? So the way we do that is we go to Well, it figures this literally cuts off just at the point where I can see what the number or the letter would be. This is W. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to W, render, and we're going to start on frame 50. Boom. Sequence 50 to 72. 72? Wait. Why did it go to 72? Let me double check this, friends. Let me check my render settings, because what I'm worried about is that it actually saved it in the wrong place. W. Yeah. Episode 3. W. Render. Why, oh why, oh why? Did it stop at 72? Did I stop it? Maybe I stopped it before it was done rendering. Silly me. Silly me, friends. I probably did. That's probably, I mean, I've certainly done stupider things in my brief career here. So that's re-rendering. And it does appear. I think it's finished. Yes. Back to Vegas. Boom. Okay, and this is at 8 frames per second. And we have to grab the sort of second version of the W sequence, which is this, up to 80. Pop that in there. Properties. We don't want any resampling going on. What time is it? 11:21. Okay, we're doing pretty good on time. Okay, so what did we do? Well, we basically tricked the audience, because the audience sees Luca here. Okay, and this needs to be edited and be really, really short. So we should put that like that. Let me just make sure this is tight enough. Yeah, it's not tight enough. So what? This should go back here. Control Shift F to ripple edit it. What? Okay, so now we have problem. This is kind of a Vegas thing. It's always been the case. You zoom in, and at the subframe level, it turns out that it quantizes it to the frames, and you wind up with these little gaps you have to catch every once in a while. Okay, so Mel, he's like, what? I like it. He's just staring into space. It's totally deadpan. So he shrugs, and then stop right there. We don't want to keep going. Okay. Okay, so then Luca says, that is more or less true. That's what this bit is. So, I mean, that's what this bit is. Okay. So, having gotten to this place, oops, yeah, wait. Okay, that's not anywhere near long enough. So we're going to take these bits here. I guess I should say these bits here. Extend them. So Lucas says, that is more or less true. And it's still not long enough. Like, actually, kind of not really even close. Excuse me. And then I'm going to just extend this to frame 76, just to give myself a little breathing room. Okay, and then what we're going to do ultimately on this shot is just render it with Control R into a panel, and then save it in a because if I hit Control Shift R to do a standard render, it's going to save it over the scene I did earlier, and so I don't want that. So I'll just hit Control R so it renders into a panel, and then I can save it where I decide to. These guys should be turned off for rendering purposes, and frankly, I mean, I do need to add his mouth, obviously, friends. So let me hit the rewind button. Oh, that's true. Okay. Um. Hmm. I'm gonna keep going with this. I can kind of see some, a little bit of a flaw in the storytelling, but I think we're probably okay, and it isn't gonna kill me to create the assets to make this all work. So, fill that. Oops, I said fill. Fill, blast you. Okay. Um. Generally, I have a good bit of latitude on Luca's eyebrows insofar as how I color them. Not a particularly big issue. All right. And skin wise, poof, poof. And garment wise, poof. Okay. And then we'll call this whites of the eyes, even though it's kind of not. I'm going to hit the V key so I can just paint these manually, and then I'll lighten up the color. There are things about this shot that, arguably it should be saved as a separate new Tahoma file. And so I think I will. This is going to be, it's not going to be X, it's going to be Y, I believe. Yes. Okay, so let's just do this right. And then I can hit Control Shift R, because then Tahoma will magically save all the images to the right location. So we're going to go to other save options and save it as 03-94-Y. Okay. Now if I render it, it's going to automatically create a folder called 03-94Y. It's going to create a second folder inside of that called render, and it's going to put all the rendered images there. I can prove it. There it is. You can see it. Okay? So that's good. Well, what's missing there, friends? Well, we need to deal with the shadows. Obviously, it would be kind of good for Luca to have a shadow going on. So I'm going to turn the shadow layer on. And go to Luca. Hello, Luca. Where are you, my friend? Oh, it's a very good boy. Luca is very, very good boy. Why is this? I have not practiced this sort of Indian or Sri Lankan sort of accent in a long time. So I need a little practice if I want to do it well. Or as my friend Guido would say, do it well. I used to make fun of her all the time because basically she's from Bombay and she would reverse her W's and her V's. So instead of saying very well, she'd say very well. Okay, but the question is, why can't I draw? I hit the B key. Oh, I guess I can. So I'm going to put a little bit there. Just a little smidgy widgy poo underneath the hat. Obviously, he should probably have a little bit of a shadow under the old chin region. And you're going, wow, man, dude, those shadows look pretty horrendous, fella. Like, what are you thinking? Well, you don't know the whole story, pal. What's going on is that when we render, it looks beauteous. And the reason for that is that, and by the way, I don't think his head position changed. Yeah, all his changed was the position of the eyes. So that means, go back here and go to the whites of the eyes material, hit the V key. Or as Gita would say, you must strike the Y, or I'm sorry, the V key. We. I'm being silly. I love Gita. She's my very good friend. In fact, I need to give her a call, actually. Truth be known, I haven't talked to her in a while. And she's probably mad at me for that. Okay. He looks a little A little bit cross-eyed, not perfect, but not horrible either. What will we do? Well, we've got to put in a mouth. We must put in a mouth, and probably the way to put in the mouth would be to do it with the. What do we want to use? We could use a vector layer. Would you like to use a vector layer? Is it annoying people that I speak in an accent? It may be very, very annoying. I don't know. I don't know because I do not know how you think. I do not know what you love. But this is basically Luca's voice. Luca's voice, except he's much higher because he's a little boy. He's very small, but he's a very good boy, very resourceful, very resourceful. He does amazing things, very clever, and good friends with Monkey too. So yeah, when I do these voices, sometimes I make mistakes. You know, it's like I have to sort of get in the groove to really pull it off. All right, let's do it with vectors. What the heck? So we'll add a vector layer, boom, and then all we're going to do, okay, hit the B key, that would be good. He says, that is more or less true. And then I think, well, let's just see how it plays. Rewind, boom. That is more or less true. That is more or less true. Okay, fine. Okay, so now what we need to do is this is comped on top. So I'm going to turn this down to a modest level. I'm going to add a little bit of red into the black, and then that kind of informs, yes, that informs the level of transparency. We could do this in the compositor, obviously. But what I'm going to do is just do it here at the level, level, and then make sure that in my file, I think it's scene settings. I need to turn on this. Enable column, color filter, and transparency for rendering. And by the way, I've never fiddled with the color filters, so I have no idea what they're even useful for, to tell you the truth. More or less true. Okay, it's more or less true. Okay, so then what we want to do is hit the B key here. I'm just going to draw a little circle up here. Now, if you think that's insane, understand the reason I drew the little circle is because if you're using a vector level in Tahoma 2D and you have it set for auto close, auto group, and auto fill, which is exactly what you will want to do if what you're trying to do is draw closed filled shapes, which is very useful for shadows, very useful for mouths. Problem is, be careful. If I have these set and I just click the screen with my mouse or my stylus, last time I checked, Tahoma 2D will crash because it doesn't know what to do with a single point when the way that the vectors are rendering assumes that you've got a closed shape, because a closed shape clearly implies that you have at least two nodes and preferably three. You know, 1, 2, 3, close. Where if I just click the screen, there's only one node. And it doesn't know what to do with that to make a closed shape, and so then it crashes. That was true some time ago. I don't know if it's still true. Okay, so now my question is the compositing effect of the shadows and the level-based layering of the transparent mouth working? Let's find out. Yep, it looks like it is. Okay, a couple things I want to go in and tweak, though. On the vector level, excuse me, I'm going to hit the C key. And yeah, there's just too much here, guys. Too much. I'm just going to start deleting nodes just to make this like superly duperly more cleaner. Way more cleaner. So if you want to do this quickly, one good way to do it would be just grab the nodes that are kind of in the middle and cut them out. and that leaves everything a little sharper. And then you can obviously use the Bezier handles. If you zoom in, I guess. Yeah, you can use the Bezier handles to dial it in. Okay, so lip sync is what I call anime style, which pretty much amounts to open mouth, really open mouth, somewhat closed mouth, back to the open mouth, back to an almost closed mouth. That's not exactly what I did here, but that's the general pattern. And it's what you see in anime, and what it does is it gives you the ability to have lip sync that pretty much is going to work in any language, which is kind of important for this show. Kind of important. So there's that. This I don't quite like. I'm going to get rid of that node, just see what happens. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is render it. Boom. And I'm going to stick it in the show, even though it doesn't have a background. What time is it? 1:42. So I'm going to be doing 2 hours here, I would say. Ocarina 2 something, 86, 96, I can't tell. Ocarina, hi to you too. Welcome to the show. And you're going, what happened, Dave? The screen just went blank. No, it didn't. All right, what I got to do is switch over to Vegas now. Boop, boop, go over to the other screen. And let's pop in the sequence of Luca, which of course is going to be 0394Y. And 183, oh no, that's not good. Okay, hang on. We got to do a little correction here. We'll switch screens again, and let's go into our image. The problem is, it's my fault. Tahoma 2D just rendered the entire range of the project, or scene, I should say, instead of just the frames I wanted it to render. So what I'm going to do is just go in here. We're going to do this the most brain dead way possible. We're going to go into folder Y, render. We're going to take everything that's not Luca shot and delete it. Okay, 183, that feels pretty long. Let me see. Let's just go through this and see what happens. Oh. Weird. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a lot of hold frames. So let's go back here. No big deal. No big deal, friends. It's all good. And we'll start here, open that. I mean, 129 frames for something that short seems pretty crazy, but wow, dudes, let's just see what it is. Yeah, it's just a long time of him hanging on that last pose. So we'll just, first of all, let's obviously turn off the interpolation or the resampling. There's that. Okay, so what do we have? Come on, guys, we can do this. Blah 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 blah. I can't help noticing the boat has no oars. What? That is more or less true. Okay, cool. Got through that. So now we just need to add the background to Luca. And there's multiple ways to do it, but the question one might be asking now is, what's the most brain-dead simple way to do it? I'll tell you what the simplest way to do it would be. Would be to come over to Krita, load up the last shot we did, which was this one. Because we've already got the animated background in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go like this. I'm going to go to this keyframe that's animating the background, and I'm going to remove the keyframe and pull. Okay. It only pulled it one frame, unfortunately. So now will Krita let me move this? I hope it will. Yes. Okay. So we've got this here, and now what we want to do is go to the end and just move it some more. So what we did is we took where the boat ended up in the last sequence with these two, and we modified it so that the final keyframe on the positioning of the boat relative to the background is now the beginning keyframe on this shot. In a moment, we're going to remove these characters. We just want the background painting. And this background painting, for those who are wondering, yes, it was generated by AI. There's a little bit of manual painting involved, kind of making my own or whatever, but basically, yes, it is a AI generated image. So what I want to do is just grab this, hit Control Shift Alt, and just move it a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to take this group, and just kill it. We don't want it there. Yes, as you can see, I guess for this shot we don't need the boat, so let's get rid of the boat too. So you can see the AI put this is a great example of what AI is really good at. You specifically tell it in the prompt, don't include the characters. You're just trying to show what the characters in the boat would see. And of course, what the AI does is it goes ahead and draws the characters. And it very rarely doesn't make those kinds of mistakes. It's a bit ridiculous, but that's it. That's the state of the art today, so not a big deal. Import animation frames. Well, import what animation frames? Well, we want to import these. Now, this is an important distinction to understand. I'm going to hit the Control A and bring these in. Important thing to understand. Okay, this is really ridiculous. This is quite ridiculous. Again, ignore this. Actually, you know what? We really need to. I should have done this as a file layer, honestly. It would perform better, and we wouldn't be having to deal with this, because I would have painted this character out a long freaking time ago. Okay, but let's keep going. Let's hit the play button and see what happens. Yeah, so again, all of this, like literally all the way to the end, Control Shift X. Just get rid of them. They're all they're superfluous. Okay, now stop everything. Save as. This is going to be 0394, not X, but Y. Boom. Is that correct? I think that's correct. Which one is Mel? Mel was W. Then we've got X, and then we went back to W for this shot. Got it. Okay, so this is Y. Got it. Okay, so now important thing to notice is that we can, and I'm just doing two things at once here, so this should be 26. Hello? Did it change it? It does not look to me like it changed it. Yep, it did. Okay, so save our work. Okay, I rendered the images of Luca out of Tahoma. Then I brought the images of Luca into Krita. Understand that once I brought these images into Krita, they are baked into the Krita file, which means that I can overwrite these, render into the same folder where the original batch of images was, and what will happen is magically in Vegas, this image sequence will simply update to include the background. So the problem that we have, obviously, is that we need to paint this character out. And then there's more involved because we need to actually give Luca a rim light. So let's do the rim light first, because somebody out there is probably wondering how you do it in Krita, right? So what we're going for is something along these lines. Okay, here's how you do it. It's really simple. Duplicate the layer of the character. With the duplicate, which by the way, you really want to pin these to the timeline. Okay, take the duplicate, grab all the frames in the duplicate, hit Control M, reduce, that's the curves tool basically, reduce this to black, click multi-frame so that whatever it's going to do on every single frame. Boop. Wait, done. Okay, save your work. Don't be stupid. Save your work. Okay, that's the first half. The second half is now you're going to add a transform mask, which lets us move this bit like that. But that's not all. We're also going to take this copy and we're going to click A for alpha, which locks because it's in a group. These are in a group. I can close up the group, you see. Okay, because this is alpha locked, that means that the layer under it is going to mask it, and so this shadowed area will not go outside of the boundary of the underlying character. And then you just freaking turn it down to where you want it to be. Ta-da! Also, not the worst idea ever is maybe add just like a 2-pixel blur. 5 looks okay, actually. Okay, so that's that. All right, we're almost done. We'll go ahead and render this because I want to set up my render settings. Key point being this needs to be Y, and this needs to be Y. Because remember, I do this all the time, where I'm creating one scene where I'm building on the assets from another scene. Okay, and so now it is going to overwrite them, and what should happen is when we look at Vegas, what we're going to see is that now it's been updated to reflect this image sequence. Let's see if that worked. It says no. Okay, it says no, and the reason it says no is because something about the image sequence seems to be missing. Okay, so I'm going to ignore the missing file and leave it offline because I just want to make sure I didn't make some bigger mistake, and I did not. So I'm going to take this, delete it, clean my media pool, and just re-import it right now. 94, 26 images, perfect. 8 frames per second, perfect. And drag it in. Okay, and as you can see, it is correct. So it must be that it was just off by one image number or something, and so it just couldn't match it up. All right, back to Krita. So now what we need to do is go into this, hit the, actually one thing I am going to do right now, and I think I can do it with a transform mask, is I'm going to go image, trim to image size. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, that is interesting. It added a bunch of keyframes. I've never seen that before, but okay. Let me see if it still moves. It does. Ignore that little hiccup there. That's just an anomaly of Krita. Okay, okay. So apparently when I trim this, it's going to add, it's basically baking down keyframes and interpolating exactly what each little change from frame to frame was, instead of interpolating with a Bezier curve or something. Honestly, okay, that's fine. I don't really care. All I want to do is isolate. I'm hitting the tilde key to isolate just this layer so that I can paint this obnoxious looking anime character out of it. How am I going to do that? Here we go. Let's grab Conan brush. Nah, I think I'm going to grab oil paint because I want a little bit more blending factor in. So I'm going to grab this blue right here and hang on. Okay. We have to turn off the transform mask. Otherwise, we're literally painting in the wrong place. So we have to deactivate the transform mask temporarily. All right? So let's just do this. Boom, boom, boom. Get out of there, kid. Get out of there. You don't belong in my painting. Boom, boom, boom. And let's grab that color. That's pretty much going to do it. Make the brush a little smaller. And now I'm just using a little lighter touch because that with this particular brush, it's really a nice brush. It basically goes into blend mode when you don't push as hard. Oops. Okay, so let's grab that color. I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bigger again. Keep it loose, right? Keep it loose, keep it fluid. Right, we'll just kind of put some of that in there, and then just go ahead and let the blending function do what it's going to do, the way it's going to do it. Just no big deal. It's all going to look fine. So I'm being as light a touch as I can here, actually. I think after I finish this shot, I'm going to go ahead and call it quits for this session, just so you know. Okay, that looks pretty good. Better save our work. I guess I'll unsolo the layer and save the work. Okay, now there's one little bitty problem, and that is that now that I see this, I'm thinking I do want to see the boat in the shot. You say, oh man, you deleted that. No, hold on a second, hold on. All we have to do is open this shot, grab the boat, copy the layer, and paste this layer into this shot. Okay, and in this case, I'm going to put it below Luca, but not in the group. Okay, and then I think what I'm going to do is scale it up a bit, bring it down a bit. Yes, that looks pretty good. In fact, I'm actually thinking I probably could rotate it to something like that. Maybe even make it a little bigger. Yes, that looks really good. Okay, and then hit the blur filter. Golly, I think I only want like maybe 2-3 pairs. Just a little bit of softening. Just a little bit. Okay, now there's no animation keyframes on there, so. Okay, now we turn the transform mask back on. Better save our work, by the way. We're getting close. Okay, so the only thing I'm kind of seeing here, obviously, and I'm sure you're seeing it too, is wouldn't it be nice if we could give this a little bit more variance in the movement? Okay, here's how we do it. What we're going to do is we're going to take the group, which is actually Luca. So we're going to take the Luca group and the boat, which is not part of the group, and put the two of them, Control G, into a larger group. Luca and boat. Then what we're going to do is on the entire group, we're going to apply a transform mask. Okay, once we have the transform mask, the first thing we're going to do is insert one keyframe. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is every 4 frames, just going to move things around a little bit. Very, very little. Very little movement. Okay, so this might be a little cheese ball. It may not work. I'm sort of guessing. Again, ignore that little anomaly you just saw. No, I mean, that looks okay. That looks okay. Control R, let's render it. Jump over to Vegas and see if it looks good. And if it does, then I would say that I'm done for the session. What do we got? Anything in the chat? Not really. Okay, so let's go back to Vegas. Well, I guess I can just, it's going to preview here. So here it is. So the boat has no oars. What? That is more or less true. Okay. Should Luca have some sort of indication of a nose? He probably should. Here's the good news. What we can do, obviously we imported frames from Tahoma 2D, and so that's a little problematic. Well, wait a minute. Let's do it this way. Let's go to the Luca group and just put one. Remember, it's all going to be affected by the transform mask. So for the moment, we'll turn all the transform masks off. So then on Luca, over top of Luca, I'm just going to go, I guess we'll just grab the venerable Conan brush. All right. I am not even sure that I am happy with that location. Um, it's unfortunate I have to zoom in so far. You say, well, that's obnoxious. Yeah, there's kind of a solution though. If I turn off the shadow, I can go into this nose layer, and what I'll do is I'm going to sample a bunch of the skin and just draw a circle in the skin color. See what I did? You know why I did that, don't you? I did that so that now I can hit the A key and it selects the whole batch, and I can just get his nose where it's supposed to be. I'm just moving it around till all of a sudden I see Luca. It's pretty much the gist of it. That's pretty good. All right, then we turn this back on. Control R. Oh wait, stop everything. I forgot to do that. Save our work. Control R. And let it render. And then that's going to be it. We are at the 2-hour mark. And that's that. Okay. Let's switch screens so you can see what happened. As you can see, this did update. I like it. I like it. Everything's flowing. I gave myself twice as much work as I really should have on this entire last. This is the last sequence of the whole freaking episode. Like, here's the whole episode. We're at the end. And I made everything way harder than anything else I've done in the show, because every single shot needs this moving background because they're on the boat. It's a major pain. I ain't going to lie. But it's looking good, and we are getting really close to the end of episode 3, so it'll be nice to get it done and get it released. So if there are no questions in the chat remaining, I'm going to give you guys like 10 seconds to chime in with your question or comment if you want to, and if nothing happens, I'm just going to call it a day and say, hey, this has been a good session. We got a couple shots done. And of course, there will be more later.